Okay, time for a new video, and whether you are somebody new to my channel or you are returning to my channel to watch this video, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm filming this video in one go, so if I stumble over my words moving forwards, apologies about that, and also apologies if the quality of this video is fairly poor as well. If there's any lag, anything like that at all, sadly it can't be helped, and hopefully it's not too much of an issue for you. This is yet another Eurovision related video here on my channel, and today I am going to be telling you what I'd like to see / hear from every country that will most likely participate at the 2025 edition of the Eurovision Song Contest, which will take place next May in either Basel or Geneva in Switzerland. As always, you're welcome to let me know your thoughts on anything I discuss in today's video by leaving a comment down below. And as always, there are links in the description to my other social media pages. Check them out if you so wish. This is the second time I am attempting to film this video. I sat down to do it yesterday, waffled on for about 40 minutes and only managed to get up to Iceland. So I think what I'm going to do is split this into two parts. I'll try and get about halfway down the list, which I think will be somewhere around Israel or Italy, and then I'll do the other batch of countries in part 2, which will surface within the next 24 to 48 hours or so, all being well. What I have here in front of me is a list of all of the nations that have ever participated in Eurovision. Of course, some of them aren't active at the moment, such as Bosnia and Herzegovina and Morocco, so I will be glossing over those countries, but everybody else I will be talking about a little bit. I also have the joint Instagram page loaded up that I run with my friend Peter, link in the description to that as always, because last September I started doing wish list posts, a whole bunch of artists that I'd like to see in contention for some of the participating nations. So I'll be mentioning those names moving forwards as well, and I'm really going to try my best and not ramble like I did in yesterday's failed attempt to film this. So let's begin with Albania, who debuted 20 years ago this year. As far as I'm concerned, FIC is probably the most old school, dated, old-fashioned national final. Is it really much of a national final? It reminds me a little bit of Sanremo in the sense that it's just a celebration of a country's music more than anything else, and Eurovision feels a bit more secondary. And FIC has been going for a long, long time, well before Eurovision was even a thing in Albania. But now it's 2024 and it still feels as though it's stuck in the dark ages a little bit. And although I do think the quality is improving slowly but surely, a lot of the songs still blend into one. We still get a lot of mid-tempo ballad type stuff, particularly female-driven ballads. And I often feel that Albania is so much better when they don't have that sort of material at the table presented to us, if you see what I mean. Eugen Bush Pepper in 2018, that was just fantastic. It was so refreshing to have something that wasn't a female-driven ballad. Now, obviously, I am all for the right song going to Eurovision, and if indeed that is a ballad performed by a woman, so be it. We know Albania is full to the brim with great vocalists, but the songs are often the issue. And of course, what we have at FIC is not the final version. There is usually a revamp. The language of the song might change. Some of these revamps, as we all know, haven't been fantastic in the past. And of course, we must also not forget, I think this was introduced not last year but the year before, there is now the separate public vote. So it means that the winner of FIC is not necessarily the act who goes to Eurovision. That was the case last time out. Bessa was not the winner of the festival, which was maybe a little bit surprising, but she did get the golden ticket to go to Eurovision, but she didn't qualify. So I don't know really exactly what I'd like to see from Albania necessarily, but I do think the national final setup, FIC itself, it needs to get with the times, because it just feels like it's lagging behind a lot of other countries. But slowly and surely, it is getting there. It is getting there. I'm just taking a look at the wish list post here. Vanessa Sono, Ines Neziri, Elvana Jatta, who was the runner-up a few years ago, and there was controversy that she didn't win. And of course, Arilena Ara, who would have represented Albania in 2020 had the pandemic not ruined things. Maybe a few years have passed now. Is it time for her to come back and try and represent Albania once again? She definitely has a cracking voice, and the song that she had at the time, that grew on me, and I think it might well have qualified. So maybe it's time for her to return. But otherwise, I wouldn't be mad if Eugene Bush Pepper tried again. Maybe a bit more rock. Albania haven't really been represented by many bands at all. Albina and Her Family, the male duo in 2013. Can't really think of another band. So maybe it's time for a few more bands to jump on the thick bandwagon. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to Armenia. I think they are improving. After years in the wilderness, I think this is a country that have really turned a corner, because they just weren't qualifying, they weren't doing very well for a couple of years, but now they are improving year upon year. Ladaniva did well in Malmö. Last year, Brunette did quite well. The year before that, Rosalind, okay, not a brilliant result, but in terms of streaming numbers, sensational. And I think now there must be quite a bit of confidence amongst the Armenian delegation and the whole team that they have over there, that maybe they could challenge for the win sooner rather than later. Now, I would not be mad if it's a returning name. Sirusho is somebody whose name pops up every year. She did well in 2008. Certainly enough time has passed for maybe somebody like her to try again. Athena Manukian, who would have represented Armenia in 2020 with Chains on You. Maybe it's time that she tried again, I don't know. But I think somebody they need to look at, especially if they are going once again down the internal route, is former junior Eurovision winner Malena. If she comes along, I think she's 17 or 18 now. If she comes along with a song that's not a million miles away from what she won junior Eurovision with, Kami Kami, that could be something very special indeed. Because I think she's got such a great look. I think she's got a pretty good stage presence. I mean, the whole performance that she had at Junior Eurovision, the song that she had, it was so impressive. It felt so grown up. It felt so mature and so interesting and so strong, in my opinion. So maybe it's time to call her up and see if she fancies doing the adult competition. We've seen former Junior Eurovision acts take that step up to the adult competition. Maybe Malena is the next one, and Armenia could be onto something very special. Otherwise, I'm not terribly fussed about the genre. I think having it in the Armenian language would be fantastic, something that's maybe a bit traditional again. That would be quite appreciated by myself and many others, I'm sure. We'll just have to wait and see what Armenia bring to the table. There was no wish list post for them. I only did countries that have a national final. Moving on to Australia. Well, Australia is a country that usually appear in the grand final, but the public scores are usually fairly disappointing. If we just take a look at the last few Australian representatives, Electric Fields didn't qualify, admittedly. Voyager, they finished in the top 10, but the public mark was disappointing in Liverpool. Sheldon Riley, mid-table, public mark was crap. Montaigne didn't qualify. Kate Miller-Heidke maybe underperformed ever so slightly in the public votes, because she was tipped to challenge hard for the win on the day of the final. Jessica Mauboy didn't do well with the public. Isaiah didn't do well with the public. So it seems to be a running problem, and I don't really know why. Maybe the songs Australia have brought to the contest just haven't been that strong. But we have had a fair amount of diversity. Electric Fields had something that I suppose was a little bit more traditional in sound. Voyager brought something a little bit heavier. Sheldon Riley, big ballad. Montaigne, hyperpop. Kate Miller-Heidke with this sort of classical voice and swinging about on a pole. We've definitely had some variety, so next year more of the same. What I don't want is Australia to just go down this recent route of picking names that tried previously to represent the country when they had a national final. The only name that I would like to see maybe represent Australia who has previously appeared in a national final is Jaguar Jones. She had a song called Little Fires a few years ago, which was absolutely fantastic. I'm sure that song would have done quite well had it gone to Eurovision. And she had a song called Rabbit Hole a few years ago as well, which you might well recall. I can see her representing Australia. I really can. So if it is her, fantastic. Otherwise, Australia is full to the brim with decent musicians. Stand Atlantic, a really great band, sort of pop, punk, rockin' style, female lead singer. They've got a new album out next month, I believe. It will be their 4th. So maybe that could be a different flavour, a different sound for Eurovision. I don't think they'd ever do it, but you don't know if you don't ask. Gabriella Chilmi, who years ago burst onto the scene, she had a great song called Sweet About Me. We're going back a long time here. Excuse me. We're going back a long time here. But I've followed her career ever since. She hasn't released much music over the past couple of years, but she has such a distinct voice, and I think she would be a fantastic representative. And also Amy Shark, who is in her late 30s. She's got a new album out very soon. It'll be her third. And she's a pretty big deal in Australia. She's been very successful. And boosting her profile outside of her homeland, Eurovision would be a fantastic thing. And I think getting her to do it would actually be a real coup. So if I was over in Australia and I was part of the delegation, the selection committee, whatever it is, I would be looking at those names that I've just mentioned. But of course, there are many, many others. I just hope that we get something a little bit different, something that really stands out from the field, and something that really gets the public on board. We then move on to Austria, whose form has been a little erratic over the past few years. Kalin, people raved about that song, no pun intended, and then she flopped big time in the final. Taya and Selena in 2023 expected to do a lot better than 15th place. Halo, people were loving that, didn't qualify. Amen didn't qualify. Alive wouldn't have qualified had the contest gone ahead in 2020. Limits didn't qualify, but Nobody But You finished third. Now I can see Cesar Sampson coming back in some capacity fairly soon. He was involved in the Czech national final last December, I believe, but I can see him being involved with Austria again sooner rather than later. For the past many years, every Austrian entry has been in English. Maybe try French. Zoe with Rouen DC in Stockholm 2016, she was the last one to sing in that language. German, or rather a dialect of it, 2012. So maybe next year, Austria singing in a language that isn't English. I'm not too fussed about the genre. I imagine it will be an internal selection again. And I imagine Austria will be galvanised by seeing what their next door geographical neighbours have done. Because Switzerland used the same format. They've been going internal for a few years too, but their results have been a lot stronger on the whole. So I think Austria, seeing that the contest is next door to them geographically next May, they might just feel a little bit more galvanised to do really well. So I've got high hopes for Austria to get one of their best results for a long time next year. As for Azerbaijan, well, credit where credit's due, because okay, they haven't qualified for the past 2 years, but they've really been trying to do everything at home, not just roping in a couple of Scandinavian songwriters to do the heavy lifting, which I've never been a fan of. Now, Tell Me More had a bit of charm to it, but ultimately it never stood much of a chance in Liverpool, and Uzun Leopard this year, lovely song, instrumentally pretty impressive, but where were the votes really going to come from? So what I would say to Azerbaijan is, strangely, play it safe next year. A generic, okay, maybe generic's not the right word to use, but something like that, a generic, bog-standard pop song could work wonders. It could at least get you back into the final. Now, take a look at Cyprus this year. I didn't mind that song at all, didn't mind the performance, but there's no doubt about it, that was a pretty generic, bog-standard, ordinary pop song, but Cyprus did quite well with it. These types of songs can still do the business at Eurovision to some extent, and for Azerbaijan, I think that might be the way to go. Don't get in the Scandinavian songwriters, though. Do it yourself. Maybe get one of your biggest musicians to sing it. Maybe get a returning name, Samra or Safura from 2010. Maybe even get Chingiz on the phone again, see if he wants to do it. And just have something that feels fairly ordinary, but with a cracking chorus. You know, it's got to have that hook. And maybe the votes will come in, and it could at least get Azerbaijan back into the final. Maybe a great pop song in the Azerbaijani language. We've not had that before. I think it would be very welcomed. We move on to Belgium. I love Belgium at Eurovision. We know that they love moody, dark, mysterious sounding tracks. We've had so many over the years. It sort of started with Loic Notte in 2015, and he did very well, finishing 4th. Blanche finished 4th in 2017. Senek didn't qualify. Elliot didn't qualify. Hooverphonic didn't do terribly well. And Musty, of course, didn't qualify this year. Outrageous, despite the fact that he was tipped to do very, very well when that song was released. So what are we going to get next year from Belgium? I don't really know. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if it's a returning name here either. But do you stick with what we've come to expect from Belgium, which is moody, dark, mysterious pop? Or do we go down the Gustav route last year and have something that feels a little bit more camp, admittedly, but something that's also a little bit more buoyant and arguably a lot more enjoyable to the neutrals? I don't know. I wouldn't be mad if it's a band again. I imagine that they will just pick somebody who's been on The Voice in Belgium or something like that. I don't really know who. I know that there's a lot of great talent over in Belgium, so I'm not really fussed. But maybe a rock song. Something out of left field, something we're not really expecting from Belgium. And I will be saying this with a few other countries too. Move away from relatively safe-sounding pop, perhaps, and send something very different. Take a little bit of a risk. And rock music, which is still not something we get much of at Eurovision at all, it might be the way to go. It might be the way to go. So for Belgium, I'm going to say a rock song, maybe by a band, a band on the rise, perhaps. I'm all for it. It's worth saying as well that Belgium have not performed in Dutch since 1996. Now, I can't remember which language broadcaster it is next year in Belgium organising things. If it is the Dutch-speaking one, then maybe have a song in Dutch. Maybe. Alternatively, have a song in French. 2005 was the last time. Try something different with the language, perhaps. Anyway, Croatia's next. Now, there's going to be a lot more attention on Croatia because, of course, they had their best result to date in Malmö a few months ago with Baby Lasagna, who wasn't even supposed to be part of the national final until he was drafted in because somebody else withdrew, and he won Dora by a crushing margin, went to Eurovision, and won the public vote. Well done, him. Now, what are we going to get from Croatia next time out? Well, the aim is to go one better, but as we saw with Finland this year, they didn't go one better, they took a big step back. So it is very difficult to do, and it's almost like it was lightning in a bottle. It was this golden effort by Croatia, and trying to go one better might just be a step too far. I imagine we're going to have semi-finals again in Dora. Hopefully the quality will be a lot stronger, because in all honesty it's not been brilliant for a long time, if ever. I've got a couple of names here. Mia Negovatic, second, third at Dora. Maybe it is fourth time lucky for her. Albina was very unlucky not to qualify from that first semi-final in Rotterdam a few years ago. Maybe she should come back and get some revenge. Lorena Buchan has had a couple of cracking songs in Dora over the years. I'd like to see her back. And Luka Nizetic, who's been involved a couple of times. He had a song called Brutalero a few years ago, which was pretty fun. So maybe he should try again too. Maybe a great big ballad in the Croatian language, perhaps. Vinko, who was the runner-up, I believe, in Dora, behind Baby Lasagna. I can see him trying again. I can also see Let 3 giving it another go. For the third time in a row, I think it would be. Damir Kedsho, he'll probably keep trying as well. I don't think you should do the same again. But I think you've really got to try and send something that is going to get you into the final, is going to get you a good result, and feels fresh and different from what you had the year before. The next country is Cyprus, who have never won but finished second in 2018, of course, behind Israel. Cyprus, well, we've had Cilia Kapsis and Andrew Lambrou, both of whom have Australian roots. Next year, I'd like to see somebody who is from Cyprus, lives in Cyprus, works in Cyprus. That would be fantastic. Very much a homegrown effort. I'm not mad if it's pop again. Like with Belgium, who send this mysterious sound more often than not. Cyprus, we expect pop bangers, I guess. And the year in which they tried to do something different in 2020 with Sandro was the year the contest was cancelled. Now, I'm not saying that they should get him back and send a house-type song. But again, something out of left field. I mean, -1 for Cyprus several years ago, that was a rock song, admittedly written by a Swede, but maybe something like that again. I wouldn't be mad about it. I don't think they're going to have a national final. Maybe a song in the Greek language. I don't really know. Andromachi in 2022 had a lovely song in Greek that sadly didn't qualify. The juries weren't keen on it at all. But maybe something going in that vein again wouldn't be a bad idea, because it would feel different from what we had this year. It would feel refreshing, and maybe there'd be a lot of fans for it. I don't know. As for Czechia, well, first things first, they need to change their national final because it needs to be in a much better venue, it needs to be better organised, the sound quality needs to be a great deal stronger, and also we need the results on the same day rather than 2 or 3 weeks later. There's the online vote and the Czech public vote, but the online international vote takes precedence. I'm not sure that's the way it should be. Doesn't really bother me too much, but it is what it is. Maybe that needs tinkering with a little bit. There's talk about Czechia maybe withdrawing. Have they confirmed participation for 2025 yet? I'm not sure they have. No, not yet. They're going to announce in August if they're going to be involved or not. I imagine they will be. Yes, they didn't qualify in Malmö, but Aiko went from a very, very sloppy national final performance to something that was actually half decent. If anything, it was better than half decent. It was pretty damn impressive, her performance in Malmö. So, you know, I do think the whole national final, it just needs to look and feel a lot glossier, a lot slicker. Maybe a few more songs in Czech, a bit more diversity. But otherwise, I don't think much needs to change at all. Like with Croatia this year, maybe at some point soon, Czechia are going to have that golden entry that comes along, takes people by surprise, and they're going to do really, really well at the competition in May. In terms of the Czechia wish list, Pam Rabbit, who's been involved a couple of times, Judy, who finished 3rd with this haunting track in 2022, Annabelle, who was 7th in 2022, and Silza, SLZA, a male duo. I was researching Czech musicians last September and they came up and I liked their sound, so maybe they should be involved. But we've got to move on. I'm rambling big time. Next up is Denmark. Now here's a country that is deep in the mud. No final since 2019, since Love Is Forever, of course, by Leonora. DMGP feels quite stale. They haven't even really staged it in a big venue for a couple of years, although I think it's in Herning next spring, so that's a step in the right direction once again. I don't know what's going on. I just think they're playing it a bit too safe. I really do. I usually like the Danish entries very much. I really do. I think they've been a little hard done by over the past few years. But there's no doubt about it. There's very little interest in Denmark. There's very little interest in DMGP. But maybe that was the case coming into 2013, and then, hello, Emily de Forest came along. So, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that Denmark could turn things around sooner rather than later. On the wishlist post, Rasmus Seebach, who is the son of Tommy Seebach, who did well for Denmark a few times. He was their representative on 3 occasions, I think it was. He's a big star, Rasmus, so maybe get him involved. Aja, the female duo who were involved in DMGP 2023. Volbeat, that's a rock group. Roselle, who I think won the X Factor in Denmark, something like that a few years ago. Drew Sycamore, Ellen Borg, Emily de Forest again, and Soren Torpegard Lund, who had this wonderful romantic sounding ballad in 2023. I'm not sure I love the format of DMGP. 8 songs, okay. They've got to be 8 really good songs though, that's the thing. Then having a super final, jury vote, public vote. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it could be changed ever so slightly. I just think the quality needs to be a lot better, and I have faith that Denmark can absolutely improve matters next year. The absolute aim has to be qualification. A song in Danish, I'd be fine with that. Not bothered whether it's a man, woman, non-binary, band, not fussed. It just has to be a very competitive song. The next country is... How long have I been filming for? Okay, we're not doing too badly. Next up is Estonia. I love Estonia at Eurovision. Very much have a soft spot for them. I've been following Eesti Laul for a number of years. I don't think it's as strong as it was maybe about 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. I think the quality has gone down a little bit. They've tinkered with the format far too many times. We've had quarterfinals, semi-finals. This year we had automatic qualifiers, which I don't think really worked out terribly well. So next year, just have 3 shows, 2 semi-finals and a final, jury and public vote. Keep it fairly simple, as it used to be. I don't think there's any need to really alter the format again dramatically. We know that we're going to get a few returning names. I'd love a song in Estonian. I'd love something that, again, it's competitive and stands out and feels very fresh amongst the field. On the wishlist post, we have Ollie, who has been the runner-up twice now, and I can see him being involved again. But I do feel as though he needs something a bit different, because his two previous efforts, they're not that, different from each other. So maybe a slightly different sound, something a bit softer maybe, or even something a lot heavier. That would be much appreciated. Marilyn Malk, who had a great song in 2022 called Little Girl, which sadly did not make the cut, and I don't think she performed it live because she had COVID. She was also involved in 2020. Her coming back would be fantastic. Minimal Wind and Elizabeth Tiffany. What to make of this? Oh my god. I heard that song very recently for the first time in a while, and I'd forgotten just how wonderful a song it is. That was the runner-up, the surprise runner-up in Estilau 2022. My god, that's a great song, and I'd love for them to try again. I really, really would. I'm very tempted to send them a cheeky message on Instagram and say, look, fancy doing it? Come on, come on. We've also got Kerri, who is arguably Estonia's biggest star. Also tried to represent Sweden once in a while. It's worth checking that song out. But Kerri had Spirit Animal in 2017, and Estonia blew it and sent Verona instead, and we all know how that turned out. Spirit Animal was right there, and that would have done very well, I'm sure. A little bit repetitive, but my god, it stood out a mile. And I don't know whether she would try again, but certainly it would be a big talking point if she was involved in the lineup, because she's such a big star. Greta Paya, who's been involved a bunch of times, gorgeous woman. She was the runner-up in 2013, that was her first effort, and to be honest, she probably should have gone to Eurovision that year. It was a very close-run thing between her and Birgit. But she's great. I've liked pretty much all of her HD Lowell songs, so having her involved again wouldn't be bad. Grammar Fun, who probably should have made the final a couple of years ago. They had a nice track. Vanilla Ninja, who reformed a year or two ago, represented Switzerland in 2005. Lena Kurma, the lead singer, has tried as a soloist a few times. They're great. They've got a new song out now, or very soon, which means a new album will be coming out at some point, I imagine. Maybe it's time for them to try and represent Estonia. And, of course, Elina Born, who 10 years ago next year was there in Vienna with Stig Rasta, Goodbye to Yesterday, one of my all-time ESC favourites. I would really love the two of them to team up again. Like I said, next year marks a decade. Maybe it's time to sit down, write a song together, and let the magic happen. I'd be all for it. And I think that if they did team up again, absolutely, it could be just wonderful. Just wonderful. They could win Eesti Laul again by an absolute mile. We'll have to wait and see. I'd like a song in Estonian. Otherwise, I'm not really fussed about the style of song or indeed who's singing it. Next up is Finland. I think I'll get to probably Georgia or Germany, and then I'll give it a rest. But yes, Finland, I'll absolutely stick with UMK. It's a tried and tested format now. The quality is generally very good. I think really you've just got to send the right song. This year, no rules. It was a bit humorous, but it wasn't the strongest choice. And it felt like such a downgrade from last year and Cha Cha Cha. So next year, all I would say really is keep doing what you're doing, but send what feels very much like the strongest effort. In terms of the wishlist post, Bess, who was third a couple of years ago with Ram Pam Pam, Kuma, who had Illivoimainen last year, that was great, Sani, BM, Halu Helsinki, Poets of the Fall, Alexandra, who had a great song in 2023, but she only finished 6th, and of course Erika Wickman, who had Cicciolina a few years ago, which was a big hit amongst Eurovision fans. Of course, even if she had won UMK, she wouldn't have been at Eurovision because of the pandemic. She finished 2nd behind Axel, which was a bit controversial and surprising at the time. But maybe it's time for Erika Wickman to try again. I think a lot of people would be very interested. Cyan Kicks, yes, they were involved this year. Would they try again so soon? I'm not too sure, but I'd love for them to try again at some point soon. I'm not too concerned about Finland. I think they've got a good thing going. And hopefully next year they'll continue with a strong UMK, a great song, gets them into the final, great stuff. Perhaps in Finnish. The next country is France. Automatic qualifiers, of course. This year's result was fantastic, because it felt to me as though France were moving backwards, but then Slimane came along with a fairly ordinary song, sang the hell out of it, juries were on board, public were on board, 4th place. I would not be surprised if France sends something fairly similar next year. I can see it happening. Yes, I'd love that sort of left field thing, a rock band from France, fantastic, maybe something a little bit electro, maybe in the mould of Madame Monsieur from a few years ago. I certainly would appreciate that sound. But I think France will stick with a ballad. I really do. I can't see them veering too far away from that territory, because it worked for them this year. And there's plenty of great singers to pick from, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. France, of course, only have to breathe, and they've won Junior Eurovision. They seem to have this real great knack at writing songs for a junior audience. So I don't know. I'm not saying that at the adult competition they should have something that's very appealing to a young audience, but maybe, I don't know, there should be some sort of overlap between France at the adult competition and the junior competition, in terms of the songwriters or the approach. I don't really know what happens behind closed doors, and I'm not explaining myself terribly well here, but because France are so good at junior Eurovision, maybe some of that magic behind the scenes needs to somehow be transferred to the adult contest. They did well this year. The aim next year is the top 3. As for Georgia, well, they've had a national final in the past, albeit not for a long time. Qualified this year for the first time in years. Didn't do brilliantly, but it was nice to see them back in the final nevertheless. Maybe a song in Georgian? I wouldn't be too mad about that. Something that feels a bit different. We know that Georgia have tried some very different things in the past. Circus Mirkus, Tornika Kipiani, Nika Kocherov and the Young Georgian Lolitas, all fairly different songs. So they have been a little bit experimental. They have tried to do something maybe a little bit unexpected. I can appreciate that. Next year, I don't know, maybe be a little bit more daring, maybe have a song entirely in Georgian. I'm not really fussed who's singing it or anything like that, and I don't really have any names in mind. Although again, Georgia usually do quite well at the junior contest, so maybe there's somebody who was involved in that who is now all grown up, and maybe give them a call and see if they want to do the adult competition. Iru did, of course, didn't qualify in Liverpool, but you know, there's one such example. As for Germany, and I think this is the last country that I'm going to talk about today, I thought Germany were changing things ever so slightly. It was going to be another part of the broadcaster taking over or something. I don't think that's happening now. I think they're sticking with the tried and tested format. Isaac did really well this year. I don't think many people expected this to happen at all when the German national final songs were released. I don't think many people expected Always on the Run to win it, but he did. And then he finished on the left-hand side of the scoreboard in Sweden a few months ago. Amazing result. Absolutely amazing. Now here's a question for you. Is Always on the Run the strongest German entry over the past few years? Because results-wise, the answer is yes, because look at where he finished. But if it's not the strongest song, then how come this one did so much better than last year's entry, for example, or Rockstars in 2022, or the entry they had in 2021? You know what I mean? It's I'm interested to know your thoughts on this, because how did Germany do so well this year when all signs pointed to the fact that it should probably be a song that struggled again? I don't know. He sang it very well, no doubt about it. I think his vocal power absolutely was one of the reasons why Germany did so well. Anyway, in terms of a national final, yeah, I'd keep it the same, really, I suppose. Jury vote, international jury vote, public vote, no jokey entries. The time for that is long gone. Top quality everywhere you look. On the wishlist post, Nina Chuba, Versen Gold, they'd be fantastic. Madeline Juno, Bad Moms J, Ben Dolic, Violent Thing was fantastic, see if he wants to do it again. Santiano, Giant Rooks, and Johannes Ureding are the names that I have there. So yeah, Germany, they've got to push on. You know, they've got to look at this now and say, you know what, we've had our best result for a long, long time. We need to move well past the dark ages and push on. Now, I did read somewhere several weeks ago, Stefan Raab might be involved again at some point, which I think is a very positive thing, because that man knows what he's doing. So if he does get involved with Germany again, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. Anyway, this has been a very messy, rambling video, but I'll be back with part 2, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a part 3 as well at some point. Next up, I'll be continuing with Greece, and either finishing or getting down to someone like Poland or something. And yeah, that's all I've really got to say. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on the countries I've discussed today. What would you like to see and hear from them moving forwards? I'm aware that for a lot of these countries I am saying the same sort of stuff, but, you know, I suppose it's applicable to many countries in terms of what I'd like to see and hear. Anyway, that's it for now. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye for now.